Hi guys, so before we get into it, a quick disclaimer that there will be mild spoilers today, but I'm not going to ruin the film for you. I can appreciate that this is a new release. I'm a massive fan of the VHS franchise. I like all of these films pretty much. I've followed these since the very beginning. I think I saw the first one on Sky TV way back in the day, and of course these days you've got to have Shudder in order to watch each new one as it comes along. I used to have the original trilogy on DVD, and then a year or two ago I started upgrading my entire VHS collection to Blu-ray, and I've got them all apart from VHS Beyond, which came out last year, but I am going to get onto that. And incidentally, I have reviewed all 7 of the previous VHS films that came out before VHS Halloween. I don't have a playlist for VHS, but if you scroll back far enough, you will find all 7 of those reviews. But we're here today to talk about the new one, VHS Halloween, and in terms of how I'm going to go about this review, I'm going to take each of the segments in the exact order in which they appear in the movie, starting with the framing narrative. So let's crack on with it. Let's go. I will admit the entire history of the framing narrative in VHS is highly mixed. We've gone from the absolutely awful one in the original film to the brilliance of the one in VHS Viral, to the bafflingly unremarkable one we had in VHS Beyond last year, and everything in between. It's a very mixed bag. This year's one is highly iffy, unfortunately, but it's also the worst thing in this movie. Once you get to the main segments, of which there are 5, all of those are better than this. So we've got a science lab here, and they're testing out some kind of new fizzy drink product called Phantasma. So they're bringing in test subjects and getting them to drink from these cans. But the trouble is there's some kind of creature in these cans that's a little bit like John Carpenter's The Thing, and it reacts really badly whenever somebody tries to drink from the can. So violence and destruction inevitably follows. Everybody who is a testing subject seems to die one way or the other. I don't know what the point of this product is. It just seems as recklessly stupid as the Silver Shamrock Mask Factory from Halloween 3. It's like, what is the point in sending these really dangerous fizzy drinks out onto the market? I don't really get it. This segment is also very similar to one we've already had in VHS 85. So in that one, there was a science lab and they were staring in on this boy who turned out to be an alien with tentacles. But I thought that was a lot better than what we have here, unfortunately. The only saving grace of Diet Phantasma is that each little interlude is only about a minute. They're not long. So it's not like you have to sit through this for any great length of time. And one or two of the little sections of this story are somewhat entertaining whenever somebody dies in a particularly violent way, but like I said, this is probably the worst thing about VHS Halloween. Coochie Coochie Coo is probably my least favourite of the 5 main stories, and it's still pretty good. This film gets better and better as it's going along, and even some of these opening stories, including the wraparound, are pretty solid, really. So here we have a couple of trick-or-treaters. They're both girls. They're also too old to be doing it. They're both sort of 18. And you can tell that every time they go to somebody's door, the adult that answers it is not entirely impressed to see them. But eventually they come across this one house that's a little bit away from the others. And you can tell straight away that this is where the horror is going to spring up from. And of course, it's not long before the 2 girls are trapped inside and the front door is no longer an option. Now, I'm not going to tell you the nature of the villain or villains within. I'll let you discover that for yourself. But what I will say is that I've seen nothing like it in 30 or 40 years of watching horror. I did get slight Wreck vibes, as in the horror franchise Wreck, REC. But unlike Wreck, where you get a lot of creeping around in the shadows and the darkness, especially in that end sequence in the attic, in Coochie Coochie Coo, there's a little bit too much emphasis on the girls stomping around in a panic, shouting and bawling and running up and down the stairs. They're like bulls in a china shop. I wanted a little bit more subtlety, a bit more creeping around, even after they realise that they're in deep shit. But this is still pretty entertaining, and like I said, it's also very original. If I was giving scores for all of these segments, I would still mark Coochie Coochie Coo fairly favourably, actually. I think this one is Spanish, and I also believe that the title you've just seen on the screen translates to As Above, So Below, which just happens to be one of my favourite horror movies of all time. Absolutely love this one. So what we've got here is a situation where a bunch of party revelers have died in this weird shaped room in a mansion. Only one guy made it out, and now the police are going back to this same room in the mansion with this guy in tow, so he can help them figure out what on earth happened to all these people and how they died. But of course, the same horror that happened to the party people is about to now happen to the police who are going along to this mansion. Now, I don't want to spoil too much of what happens once we end up in this same room again, but there is this weird telephone in the middle of the room that isn't connected to anything, and yet it can still ring anyway, just like what you see in As Above, So Below. And there's also some weird gravity reversal that happens at one point, just as it is in As Above, So Below. And there's some creepy stuff to do with eyeballs, there's bodily possession, there's lots of supernatural, sinister stuff that happens in this. It's all really good. If there's one downside, it's that I feel like we're shown the horror and what it's capable of in this story, but we don't really get any fight back against it at the end. I think this story needed to go on a few more minutes just so we could have a more satisfying natural conclusion, rather than just, oh, all this horror's happening and people are dying and, oh, the end, on we go. But I still liked it. I'd still give it a good score, and just for the all the connections to As Above, So Below, I'm definitely going to give this one my seal of approval. At the time that I watched Fun Size, I thought it was going to be my favourite in the whole collection. As it happens, that accolade would go to another story a bit further on, but this is so much fun. I really liked this. So we're back into the land of trick-or-treaters on what I presume is the same shooting location that Coochie Coochie Coo was using, but no matter. So we've got a foursome this time, 2 girls and 2 boys. They're all dating each other, and straight away this story scores points because these are genuinely likeable characters, especially one of the guys who is extremely well cast, and he does so well with very few lines. So eventually this foursome, they come across this house with this basket of sweets and chocolate, and there's a sign that says just take one, but as with Adam and Eve, they end up taking more than one, and the horror can ensue. Now, I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say that we end up in a sweet factory with this one, which just seems a world away from where we begin in this residential street. And what follows is just chaos and bedlam and gory kills. There's lots of sexual innuendo. It's all fast and furious. But this approach works so much better for this story than it did for Coochie Coochie Coo, which I think needed a little bit more of a stealthy, shadowy, subtle approach. Whereas with this story, this is the way to do it. Just have absolute mayhem and destruction and people running around screaming. Brilliant. For this particular story, that was the way to go. And I had such a good time with this. This isn't even normally my favourite sort of horror. Like if there was an entire movie just for this story, Fun Size, I'm not 100% I'd be that mad about it. I'm not sure, but certainly this 15-minute version was just absolutely cracking. So much fun. Even though this is not my absolute favourite in this collection, I'm going to make the bold prediction that this will be most people's favourite. So, I don't know. We'll see about that. I'll go online and see what the general consensus is. But it would be my prediction that would be the case. Kid Print is the segment for you if you prefer real-world horror, the sort of stuff that could actually happen in real life. This is the only story in the entire film, actually, which doesn't involve something supernatural or something magical. So when this one comes along, it's just at the right time, I feel, just to give us some variety. It feels very fresh. It's about this small town where there's a serial killer at large, and he's only killing kids. Quite a few kids have already turned up dead, and we're fast approaching Halloween. We follow this one guy as he's going around with his video camera. He's got kids of his own, so he's a little bit scared with what's going on. He works at this shop that does VHS transfers, and the background setting gives this story a little bit of a Poughkeepsie Tapes kind of feel. I didn't actually like that film when I saw it, but I do really like Kid Print. I think it's highly unpredictable. It's absolutely brutal in terms of the evil and the bad things that happen here. That's one thing about VHS Halloween, actually. There is a lot of kid violence, which might put off some people. If we count the framing narrative as its own segment, that would mean that we have 6 in the overall film, and I think it's true to say that in 3 of the 6 segments, therefore, there are at least some kids dying, which is a lot. That's half the segments in the movie where kids are dying. It seems to be a thing that the more we go through the years, the more horror films are getting comfortable with showing kids dying. It used to be that you'd never see kids dying in a movie. You know, the victims would have to be at least like 16 or 17, but that just doesn't seem to be the rule anymore. The rule just seems to be going by the wayside, but whatever. The fact that there are a lot of kids' deaths in this film didn't ruin it for me. This film is way too good to be ruined by something like that, but it is something that I noticed anyway. But Kid Print, it's another really solid entry in a film full of solid entries. Home Haunt is my favourite story in the movie. It's the perfect way to end. I absolutely loved this one. So this is about this guy who every Halloween opens his own Halloween haunt. Now, I'm not sure if he's doing this in his front garden or his back garden. It was a bit unclear to me. But he's got this building separate from his own house that essentially is the haunt. It's just like a few different rooms, and he's got like Halloween decorations in all of these interconnected chambers, and things will pop out and scare people and stuff like that. Just think of that place in the film Haunt, but on a much smaller scale. But he only opens this place on Halloween, like once a year. He just opens it to the public. As far as I can tell, there's only like 10 or 12 punters that show up to this thing. But once they're all inside this year, things start to go badly wrong, because this guy, he's bought this vinyl record this year that's supposed to have like scary tunes on it, but once he starts playing it, and so the music is going all around the haunt, suddenly like violent criminal spirits and ghosts and things just start coming from the other world and going after all of these customers and the family members who are helping run the haunt. So it just becomes absolute chaos. It's actually way better than it sounds, to be honest. I don't think it lasts that long once we get to the main action, but certainly quality over quantity is the name of the game here. Some phenomenally decent kills, and I just found it really exciting. It never lets up. I love anything to do with haunts in movies or ghost trains or anything like that, and this absolutely delivered for me. And I just love the fact that it was the last story as well, because it just enabled the film to finish on such a high. Love it. Right, we've covered all of the stories, so now it's time to get to the bag of terror so I can show you what score I'm going to give VHS Halloween. Here's the bag. Let's see what we've got in here today. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.5 Michael Myers carving knives out of 5. 4.5 out of 5. An absolutely terrific score. I loved this film. The only thing it falls down on is maybe the framing narrative isn't one of the best in the series, and the first story, there are things I might have touched up about that first one, but once you get past the first story, it's just hit after hit after hit. This was nearly 2 hours of great horror fun. I absolutely loved it. It's the best VHS film in quite a few years, I would say. Potentially my favourite VHS film of all time. Maybe. I'm not fully committing to that just yet, and I'm actually not planning to do a ranking for this year. I think I did a ranking last year, or maybe it was the year before. I'm going to wait for 1 or 2 more films before I do an updated VHS ranking, but certainly this is guaranteed to be in my top 3 or 4, I reckon, at the very least. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's on Shudder. Highly recommended. Do watch it. You'll have a really, really good time, I promise. Right, we'll leave it there for today. I'll be back another time. Bye-bye for now.